Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Wisdom on Autopilot, where I interview guests that have gone, done, been places, learned things, made mistakes, had success, and they can share that with us, that we can maybe learn something, take that knowledge, aim towards something, aim towards whatever we want to accomplish, what brings purpose in our life, put it into our subconscious, and just like this car, have it steer our lives on autopilot towards any goal we want. But if you're not careful, this autopilot can have a downside because of the fear or the lies or the identity that we build for ourselves at an early age, or that other people in our life tell us and that we believe. And so I want to unpack that. I want to unveil that. I want to live my best life. I want to live life with a perspective of living like I was on my deathbed. What would I do differently? How would I live? Would I have any fears? Would I care what anybody thought? And I am pushing for that lifestyle. I want to share that lifestyle and hopefully motivate you to live the same lifestyle as well. Today, my guest is Dr. Larry Sledge. Dr. Sledge holds a PhD in music education from Florida State University and a master's and bachelor's degrees in vocal performance and composition from Southern Illinois University. He is highly regarded in the sphere of choral music nationwide. Dr. Sledge is a past president of the Florida chapter of the American Choral Directors Association, and he's frequently sought after for his clinics and his a guest conductor for choral events. Over his career, his choirs have toured to England, Ireland, Austria, Italy, and the southeastern United States. Larry Sledge is the director for the Central Florida Bach Festival. It's actually the concert that I am singing in. I've recently pushed myself to sing these classic Johann Sebastian Bach pieces. Very difficult, very complex, way out of my skill range and my abilities, but just pushing myself, learning the music over and over again, learning the German pronunciation. I want to share and inspire how we can get into the rhythm of anything we want to in life, and I think music helps us do that. It's interesting because Dr. Sledge and I are on different ends of the spectrum as far as education. I've never had any sort of musical education. I've never had a voice lesson. I'm just now starting to take cello, but he has his doctorate in music, and I just love music. And I think we're both melomaniacs. I know that I am moved by music. I feel music so very deeply. So I want to talk to him a little bit today about how music moves us. I want to talk to him about, being a man, a heterosexual man in the musical world. There's such a toxic masculinity behind expressing yourself through arts or through dance or through, playing music. And, I just want to bring enlightenment to those men who are living fractional lives, that are living partial lives and not expressing themselves. I feel like you can go to a football game and paint your stomach and, drink beer and shout at a football game to express yourself. And that is widely accepted as a manly form of expressing yourself. But I want to raise awareness that you can love music, you can be moved by music. I want to talk to Dr. Sledge today about how music vibrates us, how it changes our atmosphere, how it connects us to something bigger than ourselves. I feel like when music is in another language or we don't understand it, the interpretation there, it's the rhythm of life. Whatever we're feeling, if we're in love, if we're in pain, if we're angry, music can amp us up. It can just give us that rhythm that we need to be in to accomplish whatever we need to accomplish. I want to ask him questions about my journey through music. Maybe he can give me some pointers on my cello playing. And so I want to explore that and many other topics with Dr. Larry Sledge. Stay tuned. Can't wait for you to meet him. I'm pulling into his beautiful home here. Let's go meet Dr. Sledge. Dr. Sledge, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I've done a small introduction of your accolades, but I'm very, very honored to have you here today. Thank you for being on.
It's my honor, yes.
I think today I really want to talk to you about music. You and I both are sort of at different ends of the spectrum in that you have your doctorate in music, and I have never had a formal musical lesson in my life. But I love music. I think everyone can appreciate and love music, feel music. The first question I have for you is, how did you get into music? Why did you choose music as a career?
Well, I think one of the reasons was that I was surrounded by music in my family, not at a professional level, but as an amateur one. There was music in church. My family had pianos. My maiden aunt, who lived across the field from me on the farm, gave me piano lessons of the sort.
Oh, wow.
There was always this idea that we would do something musically, and of course I, like my older brother, had piano lessons from the time that I was a kid, and that spoke to me.
Wow.
And I think that's a very normal thing for people in my generation, and in the society where I lived, it was pretty typical of the friends that I had, that they would have that too. Well, I think something awakened in me more than it might have others, and I eventually found out that my band director was a role model, and I said to myself, well, I can do something like that too.
Oh, wow. And that sort of inspired you.
I think so.
Did you take like music appreciation, or did you go right into an instrument?
Yeah, I was a saxophone player actually,
Really?
and
Wow.
then because my church was a singing church, the Southern Baptist, we had at least half of the people in the church were singers. And I was a member of a little gospel quartet. We had a radio show when I was in high school. Every week we would sing for 15 minutes, some gospel music, and I think I learned my music theory there.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. For me, I was homeschooled, and there was music options. There were instruments that I could take, and of course, hindsight, I wish that I would have taken some musical classes, some instruments at a young age. I believe that I had ADHD, and it was very hard for me to focus. It was very hard for me to concentrate. I wasn't patient enough. Like I would strum around with someone's guitar and then just expect to be able to play, and then it would be time to learn chords, and I didn't have time for that, or that hurt my hand, or I didn't have the discipline at that point, I guess, in order to pursue it. But I've always been so drawn to music. I've always been moved by music. If I was going through a heartbreak, I would just listen to the most heart-wrenching pieces just to feel it all the way through. And it's funny, one of my people asked me, because I was in the Marine Corps, and people asked me what was the hardest thing about Marine Corps boot camp. And one of the things I tell them that surprised them, I was like, I didn't have music for 3 months. And they say, oh, I could do that. And it's like, no, you don't understand. You go to Publix, you get in an elevator, you hear music. I didn't hear any music in that environment.
You were deprived.
I was so deprived. I remember being like on fire watch, and I would sing myself certain songs, and tears would just stream down. My drill instructor, thankfully my senior drill instructor, he would call cadence, at the end of the day, and he would do it in such a way that was very musical. And I just remember, again, tears streaming down, sand pressed in my face. I'm holding my rifle at the perfect, left shoulder arms. And so like the discipline is engaged, but, just the soothing nature of music would bring me back, I guess, to humanity. Do you feel something similar when you listen to music?
Well, I think I do. I don't listen to music casually anymore because it's been my business, of course. And so if anything else is going on, I can't listen to the music in the way I want to. And so I have to focus on one thing, or all of my attention is given to music. It astounds me that people can study with music in the background, because I can't do that. The music takes over my brain.
Wow. And of course, you're listening to the music, and you're a director, you're a conductor. I mean, you're hearing. Is it because it's so distracting? You're hearing like all the lines, all the percussion. You're hearing everything.
Well, I think that there's some of that. I think that it happens in other professions too. I think visual artists notice things in the landscape or in the rooms that they're in a way that's different from the rest of us. I think engineers look at buildings and construction more analytically than the rest of us.
Yes.
And I think that's a very similar kind of thing with me.
Very interesting. I wanted to ask you about conducting and hearing and understanding the music on all the different lines. I mean, it's multitasking. how do you, can you explain that process? Like, for me, I hear the percussion, I hear the double rest, it's the silence between the notes. Like, I love all of that. When it all comes together, it's so overwhelming, I almost lose, lose my wits. So I'm just curious, how, can you walk us through that experience?
Yeah, I think this is a challenge for young conductors because they don't know which things to notice first or to fix first. Ultimately, a conductor is a facilitator, a person who looks at the score and then tries to figure out the potential in that score and then pull it to fruition. The problem then becomes, well, once you notice the things that are in the score, which things do you work on first? Which things are going to require the most important focus at the time that you're in? Well, you've been in the rehearsals with me, and we stay pretty busy. Yeah. But I don't say, okay, we're going to work on pitch now only to the exclusion of everything else. No, we actually work on several things at once, but we try to work on what's hurting the most first and cure that.
Yes.
It's a complex thing because music is so complex.
I just want to say I love going to your rehearsals, because it's an opportunity to learn for me, someone who has never had any musical instruction. It was a bit overwhelming at first, being that, but it has set into motion in me the ability, and look, I was a pudgy 6'4" homeschool kid that fought my way to become a Marine. I battled cancer 2 times, and so it wasn't a new realization for me, but I love being in your practices because
wonderful.
You say, man, we're gonna woodshed those notes, and I love that expression. But it's an opportunity to be like, hey, you don't have the skills to do this, so put everything out and listen and be hyper focused. And I think there's sort of a rapid learning that happens when we put ourselves out there fearlessly and we're able to be open to correction. We don't take it personally. You have to let your ego go. But it's just been a crazy experience that has just set my life on fire as far as productivity.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is from Robert Shaw, who was a stickler for his choirs being absolutely on target with every note, every rhythm, every word. And he believed in inspiration and emotion. But one of the things he said was, the dove of inspiration will not land until the cage is clean, which I think is a really funny way to say we have to get all the nuts and bolts in order before we can
really feel this thing. Yes,
absolutely.
I love that.
And so this is why his choirs just worked on the mechanics of it, knowing that the beauty and the expression and the aesthetics were out there to be had. But you got to do one thing before you get the other.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, the discipline required to perfect the notes, to perfect the pitch, to really, be in rhythm. And it's a very difficult thing when you just, like me, and you're romantic and you just want to enjoy the music. You just want to sit back and Romeo and Juliet the thing, but we know how that ended. So I think it's very important that we do sit down and we lean into, and for me, finding the beauty in the discipline, finding the beauty in the very difficult pieces when okay, there might be I've got to do this 2008 times, but boy, on that 2008th time, when it all comes together and everyone is together, it is worth it and it is beautiful, and it's not something that can just be achieved by anyone. It takes practice, and there's beauty in that, So I love that. Okay, so take a break from music here. I want to show you the autopilot feature. This vehicle is fully autonomous. It's a little creepy to get used to at first.
Yeah. Now you put in the autopilot that Lake Morton is where we're headed?
Correct.
Okay, so that's what it already knows.
Correct. Yes. It will actually just drive if you put it on autopilot. See how it stops behind the stop sign? It sees by sonar all of these cars, all of these people.
Uh-huh.
It's a little nerve-wracking. So, from your generation, what do you think about the technology?
Well, I think it's really marvelous,
Yeah.
and of course it's scary because you think about, well, AI and what it's going to do or what it's not going to do. I often think about what we did 20 or 30 years ago, the fact that everyone has an ingrown cell phone. Everyone has a way to find somebody else's house without actually looking at a paper map. All these kinds of things did not exist a very short time ago.
Yes.
And it changed the way everybody does everything.
It really did. And how do you think that compares to music? I mean, like some of the newer technology in music.
Well, I think it does. I think that there were, with the invention of the Moog synthesizer and other kinds of electronic things, some outcries from musicians who thought, well, there goes my job as a violin player or something else. Same thing happened earlier with Hammond organs, and all of a sudden pipe organs didn't have to exist, of course. So technology has always had its influence on music, the invention of piano, various other instruments and the like. So it's happening now. The fact that we have electronic gimmickry is now turning into just an accepted part of how we make music, how we notate music.
Yes.
I have a computer program which allows me to put on the page, without ever putting a pencil to the paper, I can put down the music that I write. Well, this is a totally different way from what Bach did, or what Mozart did.
Yes.
And it will play back to me exactly what I've done.
Wow.
I think that you've mentioned to me film composers.
Yes.
And so much of what you hear is a mix of the acoustic world and the electronic world, very successfully.
Yes.
And no one says anymore, oh, I like that acoustic part, or I really like the electronic part.
Yep.
It's all now one world.
Yeah, it's important, and I love what you're doing at the Central Florida Bach Festival, because we're keeping these pieces alive. We're performing them the way, as best we can, that Bach intended. And for me, it's a whole experience to be there and to be performing this timeless music, and I'm sure for you, conducting it and hearing all the lines and the orchestra and the different parts, do you ever feel like, wow, this is how he must have intended it? This is how he felt when he was conducting this?
Well, let's be honest here. We do not do authentic performances. We try to create the sense of what he was doing back in his own day. But I have different numbers of voices. He had boys' voices. We don't have boys' voices. We have middle-aged women.
Yes.
We have instruments that are not the same as his instruments. Our trumpets are not like his trumpets. Our acoustic is not the same as his church in Leipzig. All of these kinds of things prevent us from being like his performances. But at the same time, we try to recreate his spirit.
Yes.
And sometimes I think we do a good job. There are times when I think Bach would say, well, I didn't really intend that, but we do the best we can.
Yes. So I wanted to discuss, we talked a little bit about the emotional resonance of music, and but I wanted to ask you, how do you think music is able to evoke such emotion within people? I know for me, and we've already discussed a little bit, but if I'm feeling, in love, if I'm feeling whimsical, if I'm feeling melancholy, music just has a way of bringing that out, amplifying that, being able to feel the music. My father passed away in 2021, and certain songs come on, certain songs that I listen to, and sometimes I can't listen to them, right, because they're too emotional. But I think that the music, the vibrations in the music, I mean, I've seen a lot of things recently where certain notes or making certain designs with sand, and I'd like to get your input on how music vibrates us and how it makes us feel.
The topic of music psychology is so diverse. Many years ago, a gentleman who was, I think, a medical doctor, a psychologist, and a musician, wrote a book called Emotion and Meaning in Music. And one of the things that he worked with was the music as a language. We talk
Yes.
about music as the universal language. That's true to a large extent, but it doesn't have nouns and verbs. It's a non-referential language in which a B flat doesn't mean that tree out there or something else. It means itself. It doesn't refer to something outside itself. And we enjoy that, and we interpret that, and we react to that because of that B flat or that chord or those sounds that still mean something to you and remind you perhaps of your father or other kinds of situations. So it's a pretty deep thing that people don't totally understand. One of the things that Leonard Meyer talked about in his book was that music sets up expectations of what is to follow, and we are comforted when those expectations are satisfied, but we're also pleased when those expectations go another way, and we say, well, what a nice surprise. And when we listen to something that's familiar, I think there's a mixture of both of those things going on. There's something within our tonal memory, our emotional memory, that we find very satisfying when it's brought back to us. I don't know that anyone ever will have the total answers on it, but it's very deep and it's very real. Let's go back to Bach. I'm not a Bach scholar any more than I'm a scholar of any of the other music that I've conducted, but I do love his music a great deal, and the Bach Festival has allowed me to to explore it a lot more than I would have otherwise. When we are doing it, I find it so satisfying to rediscover the genius of this man. The fact that he could put notes and expectations and the musical grammar together in the creative way that he did. If it speaks to me, I hope that it speaks to other people in the same way. Bach was a complete individual. He was a theologian and actually taught theology. And so one of our great prizes is his Lutheran Bible, which he wrote and studied in. He wrote in the margins, he underlined words, and then reflected that scholarship in the music that he wrote. So it wasn't accidental that a musical line goes the way it does, and it's not accidental that a particular chord is used by Bach at a certain time. No, he thought about it, and the fact that is there for us to explore brings the music alive even more.
Another aspect of it is singing it in the original, language, singing it in the German. The most recent pieces that we did were Jesu meine Freude, Jesus my joy. And Christ Lock and Todesbanden. The worship translated into another language, Gottes Lamm, mein Bräutigam. Lamb of God, my bridegroom. But hearing that in another language, the way that Bach wrote it, with the beautiful music, with the harmony, I mean, it just overtakes me. I remember being on a missions trip in Mexico back in 2003. And I was at a church, and they were singing some worship songs, some hymns that I knew, but they were in Spanish. And it was like the first time I heard that, and I was just so overwhelmed. I remember walking outside of the church and just been like, these people are meeting, there's a dirt floor in here, they've got like one drumstick, the guitar's out of tune. But I think that we have to be after a certain truth or open to really feel and be moved by the music. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I think that, if you're carrying around trauma and stress and debt and all of these things, I feel like, thankfully, in my life, I'm in a place where I have shed those things, I've dealt with those things, I've unpacked those things. And in the past couple of years, music has started to sound differently to me.
Mm-hmm.
I am drawn to the more pure music, to the higher notes that maybe you can't listen to if you're burdened or just, caked over in stress and drama. And I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, let me make a point that will surprise some people, perhaps. And I had an argument with one of my past ministers that I worked with. He wanted all the music to be happy so that people would be happy. And I tried to explain to him, no, that's not quite the way it works. You sing happy stuff because you are happy.
Yes.
This is an expression of who you are. And you might sing sad things because this is a way for you to vent that or to speak to that sadness or to the needs that you have. Music is not a very good evangelism tool. It may help the people to express the things that they have in their evangelistic movement. And I think that's what happened to you as you heard people sing in another language. They were expressing what they felt.
Yes.
And that's what music does so well. The Bach cantatas do that so well.
Yes.
This is an expression of somebody believing something and believing it very deeply.
I love that. I wanted to touch a little bit about toxic masculinity. Do you want to talk? I know we're going to get super deep here, but I'm not the typical archetype of singing music. I'm a 6'4" Marine, and I don't like that there's stereotypes or archetypes, but it's just like, and of course, as a man, as a Marine, someone who loved music, who felt music, I have a past in ballroom dancing and feeling and moving to music. But when you try to explain that to some of your Marine buddies, you are weak or you're feminine or you were made fun of. And there are the greatest warriors of all time typically studied the arts. They had a variety in dance and movement. And so I just want to get sort of your take on that as well, and maybe an encouragement. I think everyone is on the toxic masculinity side. There's so much, hey, you wear the jeans and you wear the boots and you don't move your body, you don't express yourself.
Yeah, I don't know that I can speak to it as well as some other people can because I've been isolated from, I've been insulated, let's say, from much of it. I taught at a college where we had a woman president very successfully. So I worked in a department where we had both men and women as colleagues. And of course, I've worked with mixed choirs in which both the men and the women and the men and women students were equally talented. So I've not experienced much of that. I haven't even been able to see it from afar. Does it exist? Of course, I know it does. I'm aware of, in the last few months, three ensembles who have fired their directors because of their toxic masculinity. It takes over in every profession, and music is a microcosm that reflects the rest of society. Does what you talked about exist? Well, of course it does. I've not been exposed to it enough to speak knowledgeably about it. The students and the faculty members with whom I've worked are pretty macho guys. They have the same kinds of interests. They do the same. They have the same interest in motorcycles and carpentry and building things and hiking that other men have. And I think in that regard, I just haven't noticed it. I haven't had an opportunity in my world. Does that world exist? Yeah, I think it does, but I've been insulated.
Yeah, for me, it's just like, and maybe I'm hyper focused on it because I'm been in that world, right?
Exactly.
Where I've faced those things or those criticisms, and at first it's just frustration. You just ignore it. You just kind of move on. But I just finished the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi, and he killed 78 people in duels with swords. He went around and challenged the top fighters, and he studied the arts, and he talked about that a great artist had to be graceful. He had to understand poetry and the art of tea pouring and, dance and music. And, for me, it sort of touches on the fact that life is, and he talks about this, life, there's a rhythm to life. What I'm discovering is that there's a rhythm to anything. There's a rhythm to success. There's a rhythm to love. There's a rhythm, and you can jump in if you're not held back by fear. If you're willing to woodshed the notes, if you're willing to put yourself on a chopping block, and you're willing to learn, and sort of let your inhibitions go and feel the rhythm, you can jump into that. And so, for me, living in a world of what the majority assumes is masculine, is living a fractional life. And listen, there's different strokes for different folks. There's everyone has different interests and different likes and different types of music and ways to express themselves. But what I want to do is raise awareness that it's not living a less manly life to express yourself through music, through song, through dance, through art. In fact, it's a great way to express yourself, and it's a great way to maybe attract the opposite sex. I remember growing up, going to different dances, and here's all the girls out on the dance floor spinning in their skirts and dancing, and here's all the guys with their hands in their pocket in the corners. And well, I don't want to be too girly. I don't want to be, I don't want to be the only one, or I got to look macho manly. It's like, hey, they want you to go ask them to dance. They want you to move. That's how life is created, right? Yeah. So, for me, taking an early note of that, and again, you have to put yourself out there, but it pays off.
Absolutely.
And so raising that awareness that we as men can express ourselves. We can show emotion. You can be, Marcus Aurelius is another example who wrote poetry, who, but was a great, warrior and philosopher. But I believe, he believed the same thing. You have to be
assertively.
Yes. And on that point, it's funny how I got really into performing and the courage to perform was a young lady. I liked her, and I approached her with, I love classical music, and I did. But she's like, oh, well, hey, I forget who it was now, but they were performing Carmen, Bizet's Carmen at the Polk Theater here in Lakeland. This was 2004, 2005. And she's like, they need choir, they need men, they need tenors. You said you sing tenor. I'm like, oh, sure, I'll do it. So I jump in there, and there's like 3 other tenors, and it's in French. But again, it's that rapid learning.
That's right.
It's that, let me put myself out here.
Seizing that opportunity is very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, part of that peacocking or, impressing someone is being honest, being
genuine.
Yeah, being genuine. Yes. Yeah. I think we vibrate our highest levels when we're vibrating in love, when we're vibrating in being authentic. And so putting yourself out there, and you might fall on your face, but you make rapid corrections. And so I performed in Carmen. Actually, I was going to show you, and we sang the tenors, little part. There was a lot of choir parts.
Yeah, I was there. I didn't know that you were up there.
Oh, were you there?
I
really?
was there.
Oh my goodness,
yeah,
check that out. Oh, that's so neat. Wow. Yeah. So like I said, I sang in that like on a whim, but it and to impress a young lady, but it set into motion in me, wow, if I can do that, what else can I do?
Right, exactly.
What else can I put myself out there? And I think so many of us are held back by our fears, by our insecurities. Could you maybe speak on that and maybe encourage those folks who maybe want to start a career like yourself in music, but I'm not very coordinated, I'm not very good at that, I can't do that.
I've become acquainted with an author over the last few months, Arthur Brooks. He teaches happiness courses at the Harvard School of Business, and he has co-authored a book with Oprah recently, and I had a chance to hear him speak at at Florida Southern not too long ago. He makes a point about happiness. He says there's no such thing as happy. People may say that they're happy, but we're not. We get up with a headache or a backache. We are maybe taking care of a loved one who is seriously ill, or someone has died in our family. We have things that are not happy. But there are billions of people who are happier than others, and people can take definite steps to be happier than they would otherwise be. And he gives us, I think, 3 different things. One of them is try to find joy in what you do.
Yes. Yes.
And he said that's a really basic thing. It's not always easy to do, but to the extent that you can you find something that brings joy? Sometimes you have to go out beyond your normal limits. Sometimes you have to change jobs.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to look at your situation, if you're a caregiver or doing some other kind of rotten chore, and say, what within it can I find joy in? How can I push myself to a new thing that I wouldn't otherwise have considered? So that is part of it. The second thing that he mentions is that you need to find satisfaction in what you do, that you've accomplished something.
Yeah.
And if it was just handed to you, you didn't accomplish anything. So you have to find something that gives you some feedback that says, this was a valuable thing that I achieved. I worked for this. I earned that. And I think that's partly what you just talked about in your life. You found out that you could get on stage and speak French.
Yes. Toreador.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And then the third thing that he mentions is you have to have purpose in what you do. And he said that's the hardest one.
Yeah.
He said for himself, it took a long time for him to get through that part of his life where he said, I have purpose now in what I am. And so I think that you just mentioned those 3 things.
I love that.
They're very real, and a lot of people are unhappy because they haven't found those things.
Sometimes it's artificially, right? Sometimes I think we have to tell ourselves to do the hard thing, or you can lie to your subconscious and say, I like this hard thing, I like it. Now, maybe you don't like it, maybe it's tedious, but I think that there's beauty in it. You can find beauty in the discipline. You can find beauty in the fact that we just had to rehearse this X amount of times, and man, we had to woodshed it, man, we had to get through it. But now that we did it, we did the work, our voice is sore, we're tired, we're exhausted.
And now you've accomplished something.
Now you've accomplished something. That's it. And you can savor that later, and that dopamine gets released, and now you can do the next hard thing. And after the first Bach festival that I performed in, like I said, it really inspired me to start the cello. I've always been drawn to the cello. I feel like the cello, I've heard that it's one of the closest representations to the human voice, the different pitches and notes, and some of the notes will just grab your heart. They'll just grab your heartstrings.
Absolutely, I fully agree. It's a beautiful instrument, and I think that people who play, the vibrations of the instruments are much closer to your whole body than many others.
Yes. I find sometimes my form and posture suffers because I'll lean into the cello just to feel the vibrations of it. But yeah.
No, I agree with you. I would love to be a good cello player, which I never will be. But well, good for you.
Kind of messed that up at the end. Thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about the mathematical certainty of music. I feel like, life is so uncertain. Like you just mentioned, there's tragedy, there's hardship. I think music can help ease that, similar to David playing for Saul. I believe that it does soothe the savage beast. But there's also a certainty to it, right? I mean, it's left for interpretation. You can certainly change the notes. You can, hey, let's take out the dotted note there, or let's make this. But do you ever lean into in uncertain times? Do you like the timing? Do you feel the timing? And is there any sort of relationship there to the mathematical certainty for you?
Well, I think there is. music is mathematical. The vibrations that we have, the overtone series, all of those things are mathematical, and certainly rhythm is mathematical as well. So that's an implied part of everything we hear. It was interesting to me as a college student that half of the orchestra was made up of math and science students, because there was something about the left brain, right brain that was at work in those students that caused them to be violin players and trumpet players in that group. So I think that's there. Now, exactly how you can bottle that, I don't know. I think that because I was good in math in a younger time, I think that the theory of music spoke to me, and I felt gratified when that mathematical part of music came to life in front of me. Is it there? Yes. Can I explain it? No, I don't think I can.
Yeah. You sort of feel it, I think, at times.
Yeah. And one of the things that you alluded to, I think, is the vibrations of higher and lower.
Yes.
There's no question that certain vibrations speak to us immediately.
Yes.
The low sounds of a low pipe organ or a tuba or the string basses in an orchestra. Those are pretty gutsy.
Yes.
And immediately we respond to that.
Yes.
There's another part of that too, and that is volume, sheer volume. Do we know why rock groups are so loud? Well, that's the first thing that human beings respond to.
Interesting.
That and heavy drum beats. There is something that's absolutely primitive within us that it requires no further explanation. It's not very sophisticated to say that, but it's true.
Man, I resonate with that. Absolutely. I recently just went to a concert, and they opened with this classical piece, and the volume was so loud that I was in the middle. It was almost like, let's get everyone in this trance before we, lull them into our music, and it absolutely did that. It was so loud. They all sort of walked out to this music, and I just remember it grabbed. I was like, whoa! And I know what you mean by the percussion and the loud music too. That beat, it just starts moving you. I can still remember. I talked earlier about a little bit about boot camp and not experiencing music. I remember when it was Marine Week, where we were graduating and just getting our final issue uniforms and sizing and planning for graduations and such. And I went into a warehouse. I still remember there was an old radio on the desk with tinfoil on the antenna. There was a hole in the ceiling, but a song from Beyonce was on, Halo. And I just remember, it was just ecstasy. It was just like, when I heard it, I just looked at the radio and I'm just like, oh my goodness. Like, it was just, I was drinking it in my ears, and, I don't have another a way to explain it, but as we've discussed, it moves you, it vibrates you, and I believe it can be something that directs you into whatever rhythm you want to get into in life. If you want to have courage, there's music. Man, this music amps me up. This really, this gives me confidence. This lets me feel the sadness. This lets me feel how I feel about this person, in love with them.
And as you've alluded to, a lot of times they pull in memories that you've had, and those are important
nostalgic,
memories.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the podcast, as I mentioned, Wisdom on Autopilot, is gathering wisdom from folks that have been there, have done things, who are from another generation. And I wanted to just sort of ask you, what gold nuggets of wisdom, what life, gold nuggets have you found that you would like to pass on to others out there, to maybe the younger generation? Any favorite quotes or musical quotes that you like?
Well, I've been very fortunate, as you know. I've been in academia, but I've also been with community choirs, those kinds of groups. I've been involved with churches where I've made friendships, people that I've loved over these periods of time. I've been very fortunate, and not everyone can do that. But I mentioned the Arthur Brooks book, in which he talks about those different conditions that make you happier. I've been lucky to be part of those processes, and as I look back on what I've done and where I've been and where I've lived, these have been really good. I had a wonderful marriage with my wife Jean. I've had the good fortune to have two fine young people as my offspring, my daughter and my son. So these are things that not everyone has been able to enjoy, but I have. In terms of living through music, this has been a great blessing to me. I think Victor Hugo was the person who said, I won't guarantee that, but Robert Shaw quoted him, and it goes something like this, that music says those things which nothing else can express. And I've been part of that world of music, and not everyone is that fortunate. But if anyone can become part of that musical world, then they're better for it.
Music almost is like telling the truth, or being is authentic. And I think as I'm playing the cello and I'm either sharp or flat on something, I think it's almost like, to me, it relates to how authentic I'm being in life, if I'm living in truth, if I'm vibrating in truth. And I think the purest music in its truest form, and that's part of the discipline, right? Playing perfectly. When you hear a perfectly executed piece, you can appreciate that, and I think vibrating towards that with every aspect of our life, it's an example of how we should be striving to be the best version of ourselves. We should be striving to be the best father, the best conductor, the best cello player, the best because what else are we doing here? Like, what else are we doing here if we're not striving? And are we always going to make the mark? No, but take the personality, take the ego out of it, and apply yourself, lean into it, have patience, enjoy the ride, enjoy the process. I look back even now, I'm 7 months into playing the cello, and I look back at month 2 or 3 when I thought, man, I really was making a beautiful sound, and I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. And I'm sure even now, you're going to hear me today play, and I think that I'm starting to make pretty sound, and it's nothing near,
sure, you grow in everything you do,
and that's it. And like you said earlier, when it's just handed to you, there's no meaning, there's no purpose. If it was just given to you, it's what a lot of lottery winners, right, end up worse than they were because they didn't earn it, they didn't develop the skills. One of my favorite quotes was by Jim Rohn. I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Rohn, motivational speaker, but he said, set out to be a millionaire for what it will make of you to attain it. What will you have to learn? What books will you have to read? What, knowledge will you have to retain and apply to be able to not only make it, but keep it? And, I'm on a quest to do that in life. And I'm very thankful for music. I feel like I can do anything as long as I have music and I can express myself. And what I'm envious of you, I'm hoping to attain half of your knowledge in my lifetime of music and understanding it. But I feel like as I'm playing the cello, I get antsy because I'm trying to get the notes out so fast. A lot of people are telling me, slow down, focus on the note, practice slow first. But I'm so anxious to express that and get that out.
Well, I admire you. The fact that you picked up a whole new instrument and done all of this in a short time, this is amazing.
Thank you so much.
It's absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much. When you were talking earlier about the low notes and the vibration and the high notes, I picked a couple pieces. I did want to show you this piece. This piece for me, I'll just let you listen to it here. It's one of my favorite cello pieces. It's not a classic one, but it's just someone who wrote it to express how they felt. You see in your face.
That's very pretty. And the electronic enhancement, of course, now is part of our age.
Yes.
Okay,
she's not doing all of that, of course.
No. So there are dual tracks going on.
just see the expression on their face. It's just almost like, for me, I love interpreting music, adding lyrics where they're not.
There is another aspect of what she's playing that is recent, and that is minimalism. The use of very simple elements over and over again, and then elaborating on those simple elements. Glass, Steve Reich, some of these other minimalist composers got us thinking in a different way, and that's what she's kind of building on. This piece. Who's the composer?
I believe this is a YouTuber. I believe that she writes these pieces.
Okay, all right.
And this long note held out.
Yeah. Well, my point is, we would not have accepted that 50 years ago.
Yeah, isn't that something?
But we accept it now.
Isn't that something? And the simplicity of it, for me, it's like at the end part, I don't know, again, romantic, but it's like this thing, that thing, all these things I have going in my life, but still I must go on, and then, and it's just the vibrato and her discipline. It just brings it together to me to march on no matter what we're going through in life,
I talked about the emotion and meaning in music.
Yes.
That repetition of an idea comforts us.
Yes.
We know what to expect, and then she puts something in there that we didn't expect, and that's the surprise of new things.
Yes.
And so we find meaning from both things.
This is just a quick, but piercing high notes. How can you not be moved by this? Just the perfection, the discipline. I feel like if you're not moved by those notes, you might want to check your pulse. Just the way she's ready at the top. And just executes it.
Yeah, she's a wonderful player.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, another YouTuber. And again, I could have brought a number of classical pieces for you but I just wanted to show you, people that are just creating music and feeling music.
Yeah, and the important point you're bringing here is that speaks to you.
Yes.
And you're not alone. It speaks to a lot of other people, otherwise it wouldn't be there.
Yes.
But it speaks to you.
Yes. Yeah. And it becomes how I express myself, how I get it out. Yep. And speaking of which, this is my father's favorite song. It Is Well. My wife also plays the violin. I wanted you to hear this. This was us playing It Is Well together. And this was actually about 2 months ago. It was about my 5-month progress. Butterfly. My wife's a lot better than me. She's been playing since she was 5.
You're quite good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're doing very well.
She carried me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's also a good tune.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it is. Yes, that helps.
The organist, at one time the organist at First Pres here in Lakeland, would typically choose that hymn as a improvisation piece, and then he would make it go on for about 5 or 6 minutes. And I remember that so fondly because it was such a good piece to do.
Yes, I love it. Love it. Any favorite quotes? Any favorite musical quotes? Any composers that had any quotes that you like?
Well, I gave you the one from Robert Shaw, and I think I'll
stay with that one.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one that I want to share with you. You might have heard it, and it's really since we're starting this new Bach festival season. and we're doing a Mozart piece, which was just interesting. And you were talking last practice about the dynamics between Bach and Mozart. So I picked one of my favorite quotes. It was found anonymously outside of an opera house in Germany, and it said, "Bach gave us God's word, Mozart gave us God's laughter, Beethoven gave us God's fire, God gave us music that we might pray without words."
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
And it's really neat for me now that we're doing Mozart, and you just hear the very allegro piano coming in, and it's just like, okay, well, there's the laughter,
Yeah, there is such creativity and genius in both those composers, in both Mozart and Bach, but they come out differently.
Yeah.
What you're going to hear in Mozart as you study it is, well, Bach would never have done it that way, but
true.
Aren't we glad he did?
Yes, and that gives us the variety, to feel the different emotions, of creativity. So that's great. Last one by Tchaikovsky. "Music is the most beautiful of all heaven's gifts to humanity, a candle in the darkness. It calms, enlightens, and stills our souls."
No, that's very good.
So I love that one as well.
Yeah, despite the fact that Tchaikovsky didn't have a totally happy life.
No. It's funny. I was going to ask you to expound on some of your knowledge of composers. I actually share Mozart's birthday.
Oh, you do?
January 27th. And in college, I took a music appreciation class, and my professor said that he was very poor, and he was eating out of the dumpsters of Vienna, and died of maybe undercooked pork. I don't know if you've heard that.
No, I think that there was the plague going around, or a similar kind of pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think it probably got to him. He was not. He had financial ups and downs.
Yeah.
And he was not very wise in his use of money. He did like to gamble, and there were times when he could have hung on to more of his money.
I see.
So it was his own fault at times.
I see. He was probably a hypomanic like myself.
Right.
So. That's great. Well, Dr. Sledge, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Well, thank you so much.
I want to bring back conversation and expression, and really diving into, these beautiful works of art and pieces of history. I'm so thankful and honored and blessed to be a part of them with you. If you're in Central Florida and you would love to be absolutely delighted with beautiful performances, I'm going to post all the information here and in the description for the Central Florida Bach Festival. It's been my absolute honor having Dr. Larry Sledge on today, and so very thankful for that. Thank you for your time,
Well,
sir.
thank you.
Yes, sir. Top button. Oh, you know what I didn't show you is do you want to go fast? Do you like to go fast?
That's right.
I was going to say, this thing will go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I usually do a Tesla launch and show people how fast it goes. But if you're good.
It's okay.
Okay, so you go fast on
Anyway.
that. Top button, yes, sir.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. It's always an experience. Trying to drive, film, and...
Well, I would rather we not hit anything.
Yes, of course. I will be safe. It is on autopilot. It is watching for me. He's an absolute maestro. He's so artful. I love going to his practices. He's so tactful in correcting us. He'll be like, "You guys were going for excellence, and you just didn't quite achieve it." Or he's so funny. He's so tactful and colorful and expressive, and just talking to him is like being, in part of an art piece. I love doing the podcast in here because it's sort of a metaphor for putting our wisdom on autopilot. The name of the channel. I believe that we can learn things. I think things that were buried, and taught to us at a young age, they come out automatically. We aim towards and lean towards what our subconscious mind has been told, true or false. So I think we can sort of hack that and say, for me, I'm 7 months into playing the cello, and I'm playing full songs, and
Well, that's very impressive.
well, thank you, and I hope to show you a few pieces today as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, you are really impressive.
Thank you.
Well, two things that are really impressive. One of them is that rhythmically you are so on target.
Shaking, so.
Oh,
that'd be a
I
lot.
mean, so many beginning instrumentalists,
The timing.
especially, just do not do it.
Yeah, I can attribute that to dance, maybe like learning the rhythm of dance,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and you'd mentioned that when we were in the car.
Yeah.
One of the things that Bach does, so many of his pieces are built on dances.
Yes.
Dance forms, and
Yes.
you know, we did the Bach cantata,
Yes.
the Bleibauens a year ago. All of those kinds of things have underlying dance rhythms.
Yes.
And so that, you know, there you go. And the second thing that I'm really impressed by, you've gotten rid of the tapes.
Yeah.
You're really well in tune.
Thank you, thank you. I was so nervous and shaky. It was not as good as I normally am.
I can remember back when I was a student, our cello teacher would be down the hall in the music building practicing for hours,
Yeah.
trying to find out exactly where that was in tune. Well, you're done
Thank you.
as well as he did.
Thank you so much. They say you won't make beautiful sound with the cello for 1 year, and I was out on a mission to defy that. And speaking of Bach, I don't have much of it, but I'm working on. It sounds so rough right now, but anyway, yeah, I am working on it, and
Amazing progress.
yes,
It really
yes,
is.
Thank you.